Hello. Am I audible? Yes. Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. So I'm Steve Revill from RISC Open, and this is over 10 years we've been doing this now. So I'm very much looking forward to this presentation. So I think we said it was going to be an epic show, and it certainly is panning out that way. So first things first, I'd like to say a welcome to RISC Developments Limited. So I don't know if you came to their presentation earlier this morning. There's a new company set up in the RISC scene that's looking to be doing professional services and developing new and exciting projects. So RISC Open, we're very happy to hear about this. Everything that breathes new life into RISC is very welcome. And I'm sure we'll be helping out with them and getting involved with all of their projects, no doubt. We're seeing that this year is panning out to be quite exciting. There's all sorts of good stuff going on in the scene. I'll talk you through some of it. So I would like to start by talking about something called RISC Epic, which is the new product that we've released today at the show. There's been plenty of speculation on the internet about what our Epic announcement's going to be. So yes, we haven't teamed up with Apple and Microsoft and Google, and so I'm afraid that's not what it is. But no, it isn't a new font either. So no, RISC Epic, it started off as an idea that we've had for quite some time, which is we wanted to be able to sell the complete solution of getting a good RISC setup working without having to tie lots of different bits together on the Raspberry Pi, hence the Pi in Epic. So we have been for some time, we've released the RISC, the basic RISC installation on our website. You can download the ROM, you can download the disk, you put it all together on SD cards. You can buy those SD cards from us for about £10 plus VAT. So we also sell a product called the NutPi, and we've been selling that for quite some time. And the NutPi is basically us going around the community of RISC commercial developers and saying, you've got this great product, we'd like to be able to sell that to all our newfound audience in the Raspberry Pi world. But they're not going to pay top dollar prices because they expect everything to be free. No one can manage free in the RISC world easily, so we cut a deal where we said if you do a version of your software that may be a bit cut down, or it may be the full commercial software, but it only runs on the RISC on the Raspberry Pi platform, then we'll include it in our NutPi product. So we actually got about £500 or £600 worth of software, and we sell it for about 35 or 42 including VAT. So there's this NutPi collection of really useful, good commercial grade software for RISC, and there's the basic RISC software itself. And so Epic is basically combining all that and putting it on a useful size SD card. So instead of a little 2 GB card, it's a fast class 10, I think. 16 GB SD card, and it's got all of RISC, all of the disk image, and all of that commercial software. And we're selling it for £50, which is including that, which is basically adding the two costs together. So you can get everything in one place. So it's at the moment it's a show exclusive because you can only buy it here. But in the coming days, over the next week or so, we'll put it on our website as well, so you can buy it online. It does have the latest release candidate of RISC for the Raspberry Pi, which we announced a couple of days ago. So it's called Release Candidate 15. Exciting name. So one of the key things here is that it runs on Raspberry Pi 3. And that is true of the commercial software as well, and the NutPi. So it's been, to quote the name, it's been an epic task, actually, collecting together all of the bits of third-party software and making sure everything works on Pi 3, as well as fixing all the various Pi 3 bugs in RISC itself. we've got hundreds of changes since the last release candidate for the Raspberry Pi, and if this even will let's see if this will play games with me, or if it'll just work. So if I flick over to here, oh no.
Might take a few seconds to swap over.
Right. We've lost the display. That's not very good, is it? Let's just try that. I shouldn't have done that, should I?
10 years, Steve.
Yes, it's still
chancing your arm.
still trying to do the ambitious stuff, as in show a window. Anyway, so here is what has changed, somewhere off the side of the screen as well, since the last release candidate. So I'll just scroll a little bit. Let me scroll a bit more. No, actually, let me just scroll. So there we go. So there's been a couple of changes since the last release candidate. So if you think, if you're a bit confused about why it's called Epic, then that's one of the reasons. There's an epic number of changes since the last version for the Raspberry Pi. Many improvements. Yeah, as I said, it's on a fast card, and it includes all of the NutPi software. So another thing I wanted to talk about today is our bounty scheme, which I'm sure most people here know, is our way of stimulating development in RISC-OS in key areas. So on our website we have a bounty scheme where there are basically nominated bits of development that we believe are important or useful, quite often raised by the community itself in the first place. And we collect money in pots from donations, and once the pots reach a level that some developer in the community thinks is a good level for them, usually by working out how many hours it's going to take them to do the task, and then saying, if I was working at McDonald's for that number of hours, how much would I be paid? Then that's probably my baseline. So that's how the bounty scheme works. And we help and support the people that are doing the development, and we do some checking to make sure that what they feed back into the RISC-OS platform is of sufficient quality. And that can take quite some time to just go back and forth and get things just right. One such bounty that's recently closed is called EDID. And for those of you that don't know, EDID is the way a computer talks to a display to ask the display, what can it do? So what is your resolution? Are you an HD TV, or are you some old VGA monitor or something like that? So the beauty of EDID is that it allows RISC-OS to auto-detect the resolution of the monitor that's attached to it. And it makes the configuration very simple. You just go into the normal RISC-OS configuration dialog and say you want to use EDID. And if you reboot, then the display will come up. And if you shut down, connect a different display, reboot, you'll have the new display just working out of the box. And this gets around a lot of the problems that you saw in the past with RISC-OS, where you'd connect a display that's not supported, and you'd end up with no display, typing blindly, hoping if Wimp Mode 31 would work. So there are potentially more changes to come in the display world within RISC-OS. This isn't part of the bounty scheme, this is just general improvements that we want to see happen. So one of the things is hot plugging support. So I'd love to see the ability to unplug a display, plug in another display, maybe it's got a different resolution, and the desktop just changes mode and it's just all magic and happens. The other thing, and Jeffrey Lee's been doing a bit of work in the background, is multiple head support, and that means having multiple monitors work out of the box. And that will provoke lots of changes to the configuration plugin, for example, so you'll be able to arrange where your different monitors appear on the desktop, and whether you have the icon bar stretched across all of them, or only on one, or duplicated, or sideways, or who knows what. All of those enhancements, we'd like to see those in the future. We do have a machine called a Titanium on our stand. The Titanium itself does have dual head support, but the OS itself doesn't. So it's sat there waiting, twiddling its thumbs, going, come on, RISC-OS, catch up. So other things we've got, we announced, was it yesterday or the day before, we announced the huge drive sport. We're calling it huge, but it's actually kind of normal sizes now. So RISC OS has had this historic limitation for many, many years where, for various reasons, it can't really support drives more than 256 gigabytes. Back when I started with, well, I'm not going to say. Back then that was an unimaginably huge size. Nowadays you struggle to find a drive that small. So quite often you buy a larger drive and then you format it down to that size and you've got a load of unused space on the disk, or you do other tricks to access the rest of it. But basically we had a file system bounty in our bounty scheme, and it was one of many for improving the file system. And the first bounty was completed, and that laid all the groundwork for this. In addition to that, there was some private consultancy work that we did, which was co-funded by CJE Micros and by LSR, the people who make the titanium. And they basically commissioned some work to rewrite the file system ADFS in a modern language, so not in ARM assembler, but in C. I say modern, but it's modern by RISC OS standards. So C is far more maintainable, it's far more extensible for the development community in the future than ARM assembler. ARM assembler is increasingly such a specialist language that it's hard to develop stuff, and a lot of the core of RISC OS is still written in assembler. It's hard to maintain and develop stuff that's written there. So rewriting ADFS in C is something we've wanted to do probably for a decade. We've really been itching to do this work. It also allowed us to do some re-architecting of the internals of that module, which allows it to be more flexible in the future. And it does allow us to support drives now natively within RISC OS up to 2 terabytes, which is a significant improvement. And that is, for the heart of maths, 2 terabytes is roughly 2,000 billion bytes, which is plenty. And there is more to come. So we have opened step 2 of the bounty recently, and step 2 is basically partitioning support. So that allows you to split up your drives into different partitions that look a bit like drives. It's an ambitious bounty, and it's received enormous support initially. It was brilliant. So I'll talk more about that. Speaking of which, Open Bounty. So step 2 of the file system improvements has received over £2,700 so far. So an enormous thank you to everyone who's donated into this so far. If you haven't donated into any of our bounties recently, please do take a look at our website, riscosopen.org, and you will see in the bounties page what we've got open. You can click on them and you can find out more, hopefully in some fairly human readable language, what the benefits of each bounty will be. So we're still short of where we want that to be. So doing the McDonald's maths, we reckon that's probably £1,500, £2,000 short of where it needs to be, because it's such an ambitious bounty. Speaking of which, we have USB improvements. This is not as ambitious, but it's important. So in the previous USB work, this is the second step here. In the first step, which was completed, we improved the stack of USB software within RISC OS to bring it more up to date, fix loads of bugs. This bit is about tidying up some loose edges, primarily. So there's a different version of operating system called BSD, and in particular it's called NetBSD out in the real world. And they have a USB stack, the NetBSD USB stack, and ours is based on theirs. But we made quite a few improvements to it in our first step of the bounty, so we would like to feed our improvements back into their stack. So we want to get the 2 stacks back in sync, basically. We're also, their stack had, last time we looked, some USB 3 support, but it was pretty ropey. So we'll be looking at that and saying, can we make that usable so that we've got USB support, 3 support finally in RISC OS. So that's what this final step of USB improvements. I think it needs a bit more money than that in the pot, but it's not doing too badly. We also have this ridiculously complicated and difficult bounty. So this is 4 stages of improvements to the way RISC OS handles networking and talking to the internet, which is hideously out of date. So this part of RISC OS hasn't been seriously touched for probably 20, 30 years. It's just crazy. So step 1 is basically adding support for modern security and encryption standards, and it's to support IPv6, which for those of you who don't know, the internet traditionally uses a thing called IPv4 to address different devices around the internet, and we're pretty much running out of addresses in the IPv4 space, and so IPv6 introduces lots of useful enhancements, including billions of possible devices, or probably trillions probably. But it's a hard thing, and it has tendrils all over the operating system. So doing this work is going to require a considerable bounty being saved up. But it's important. I mean, we can't... Our encryption standards are terrible in RISC OS. Our support for modern encryption standards, we need to do this at some point. So donations into there, more than welcome. There's some other background stuff, like improving the way clipboard support works in things like Draw and Paint, so you can directly copy and paste between things like that, and making it a general feature in the desktop. Finally, there's some work in the tools as well. So this one is very developer-focused bounty. It's about adding some certain enhancements to the C compiler, and it's been running for quite a while, and it's just kind of hovering around that figure. It's not really growing very much. It needs a bit more of a push, I think, to get that one through. But these are all things that you can get involved in and support. So that was it from me on announcements. I'd just like to open it to the audience to ask questions.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, at a London show, I think it was maybe 2 years back, you said you'd look into the possibility of giving some indication of how much money needed to be raised for a bounty.
Yep.
For a programmer to take it up.
Yes.
Now, I haven't seen that on the website, any indications. Now, you did give an indication on one of them, the step 2 of the file system.
Yep.
Where you said, I don't know, 1,000 previously did something like that, which is useful to know.
Yeah.
People who haven't given yet, even for those who have. But, I mean, you're not doing it for any of the others, are you?
No, so behind the scenes, one of the rule members, who you might remember from earlier shows, Andrew Hodgkinson, now lives in New Zealand. So he's the guy who built the website and all the back end of it, all the Ruby on Rails gubbins that sits behind it. So he has recently actually found a load of time in his spare time, or whatever that is. So he's found time to start doing a load of work on updating our website. This is quite a convoluted answer. One of the parts of the website that we want to update is the bounty page. And all of the code behind that is something that he's actually starting to address now. And I would like to have a bit there that gives some indicative number. And we couldn't do that simply because basically me, James and Ben don't know how to do Ruby on Rails, so we can't really fix the website. We could have posted to the forum, but then that would be lost very quickly. But I think I would like to have a part of the bounty that says what a rough figure is. It can only be indicative because it's kind of one person's guess. If they were to do it, how much work would it be? But it may turn out that when it hits that figure, they're not actually available anymore, and someone else out there has a completely different idea. But it's good to give people something, so it's more of a totalizer that you're trying to hit the top of than just some open-ended thing and no one knows quite how much it needs. So I agree, it would be nice. I'd like to change it so it's more of a totalizer, basically. I'll just take yours first. Thank you.
Are you proposing to do Pi RISC OS for 64-bit hardware?
Not in the near future. So it would be nice, but there's quite a lot of work to support that. It's not on our near-term list of things to do. But clearly we're going to have to do it at some point, because at some point we'll stop having 32-bit support like we stopped having 26-bit support in the past. But I feel like that's a long time away, probably a decade, if not more, before they switch off 32-bit. So we're not in a hurry, basically. Hi.
It does work on the 32-bit mode on the 64-bit hardware.
Yes.
My
Yep.
question was, have you approached, since the USBs were benefiting FBSD community as well, have you approached an FBSD community on your Bounty?
Yes, so we have had a lot of interactions with them, and actually we find it quite hard to feed our improvements back to them for various reasons. So it would be nice to... We try to solidify the work involved in doing it into a bounty so that someone could actually dedicate a proper amount of time to it, because it was obvious to our just background levels of activity that it was going to become a time sink. There was just various reasons why we couldn't easily feed our stuff back. Partly that there was no one there who felt capable, in their community, who felt capable of reviewing some of our changes, which was one of the problems. And the other was sometimes just a wall of silence when you feed something back and no one feeds back on what they think. But it's typical of a lot of open source projects that you have this, and you need to be quite determined to push things through. And that's what we want that bounty to be about. Hi.
Hi. Sorry if you've already touched on this. I came late to the talk.
Yep.
In previous years, people have intimated that there may be work on multi-core handling, whether that's another version of RISC-OS that is sat on another core that you then pass tasks.
Yep.
Where does that lie these days?
So you've not missed anything because I've not talked about it, so that's good. So Jeffrey Lee has spent some time in the community. Jeffrey's a kind of one of our leading contributors to coding. So he spent some time thinking about this. Lots of people have spent some time thinking about this. And I think he has started making progress with ways of doing this, but it's a long journey. And I think the harsh reality is that because these things happen as background activities for people in their spare time, they move extremely slowly. So I still feel like multi-core support in RISC-OS is probably years away.
Would it be beneficial, therefore, to have a dedicated bounty?
Possibly, yes. Yeah.
Raise your hands, all those in favour. Come on, keep your hands up.
The problem you've got is it's a very small community with limited amounts of money sloshing around at any given moment, and if we have too many bounties open, then none of them achieve their targets. So we have to stage stuff, and I think the network stuff, the USB and the file systems it's a bit more pressing. I mean, yes, multi-core is good. You could use all 4 cores on a Raspberry Pi 3 or something. That would be great. But I don't think performance is the main problem people have with RISC-OS at the moment. I still think multi-core would be great. And there's a lot of hard problems to solve in doing it. But in our current set of bounties, it feels like it's not quite at the same level just yet. But that's probably a contentious assertion.
Back to Epic, is it high vector or low vector?
Low at the moment. We don't want to break everything. Yeah, hi.
There's been an interesting discussion on the rule forums about Linux port of RISC-OS. Is it possible to give a slightly less technical explanation of that?
He's at the back of the room. Tim's there. Yeah, he's got. So there's Tim's here. He's got a netbook with RISC-OS running on it in Linux, and it's fantastic. So slick.
Multi-threaded as well?
I've used threads in new threads in some things.
Yes.
But it's generally single threaded, just like this stuff.
Can I start another flame war whilst we're here?
Yes, please.
Linux, not Linux.
Linux.
Linux to Valves.
Yeah.
Obviously, gave out the WAV file, famously to say, hello, my name is Linux to Valves, and I pronounce Linux.
Yeah.
Linux.
Good, because I say Linux most of the time as well. I probably just said Linux. Is it RISC OS or RISC-OS? I think we need another flame war. Any other questions? Hi.
Many of us here will have heard Richard Brown talk about the new company that he and Andrew have set up.
Yep.
And I don't know whether they've spoken to you already, but it seems as though some of the things that you've got bounties for might well be things that their customers are asking them to develop within this new company.
Yep.
What do you see happening there?
RISC OS developments should clearly contribute to the bounty scheme. So the answer is RISC OS Open haven't yet spoken to them. They're still very new. I think they're still finding their feet. It's a very welcome announcement. It sounds like they're shaping up to be a professional services organisation working in the RISC OS scene to deal with these projects that maybe you don't want to expose to the harsh light of day initially. We do have a meeting that we're setting up with them, so I did speak to Richard today, and he was very anxious to get Rule on board as well. So I don't see us as diverging, I don't see us as trying to fork or anything crazy like that. I see us as working together, and I did ask, are you looking to outsource some of the development as well? So, and he was very happy to do that. So RISC OS Open could be one of the people that helps them deliver their projects. And I would be very strongly encouraging them to make sure that they feed back the improvements into the RISC OS code base rather than keeping them as just new closed source features that are added on top of RISC OS.
I think that was what Andrew intimated in his talk.
Yes, indeed. So I think it's an encouraging thing. It's great, and it's great to hear that there's real people with real projects and they've got real money in their pockets that they want to spend, because that's one of the things that really keeps RISC OS alive, is to inject actual money into it, because it does take up a lot of people's time. I mean, look at that change list for RC15 in RISC OS. A lot of that work is people's spare time, and we've still got all those bounties and core bits of development to do. Most of that stuff doesn't happen unless you start actually buying people's time so that they can make a bit more available. And RISC OS Developments is obviously showing that there are people willing to invest serious amounts of money in seeing good things happen. So, positive. Hi.
On that same note, is there any mileage in having interest-free loans?
In what sense?
Well, people could give a loan to Rule,
Right.
interest-free,
Yeah.
over a certain time period, as a way of raising money. As just another way of raising money apart from the bounty scheme.
As in investing in something and expecting a return on that investment, as in getting your loan paid back.
Interest-free loans. So
Right.
it would only be eventually after a term paying back the loan.
Yeah. Yeah. Possibly. I wouldn't want to.
You pay back via Belgium.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd have to think about the legalities of that and whether we'd end up having to sort things out with the financial services authorities or something. I don't know. It's an interesting idea, though. Yeah. One more question. Anyone else? Or have I run out?
Oh, well, sorry, I seem to be hogging this, but I asked the same question to Richard Brown, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit concerned. This is about continuity of rule
Mm-hmm.
and continuity of the thing he's setting out. It applies to both of them.
Yep.
directors can get run over by a bus, and or have a heart attack when they're finished. And you've got to think about continuity. How do you keep it going?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, one method is to have I think it would be good for democratic reasons as well, is to have somebody on the board who is elected by, in his case, shareholders.
Yeah.
One or two people are democratically elected who could represent all the shareholders. Now, I mean, for all, it would have to be something different, but had you thought of having democratically elected, one or two democratically elected board members?
So RISC-OS Open has 6 equal shareholders, individuals, spread across 3 continents. So hopefully it'll be a big bus crash. So we don't have a business continuity plan. So that's true, and we don't have a disaster recovery plan. But we do have a broad enough base of key people involved in rule that no 1 or 2 people are doing everything. In fact, most of the stuff that you see happen via the rule website did not happen because of us. So it happened because of Jeffrey Lee, or because of LSR as CJE, or it happened because of some other private individual doing a bounty. So most of the good stuff you see happen is happening outside of RISC-OS Open. All RISC-OS Open is really just the shop front. It's just the fulcrum where everything comes together. So I'm kind of weaseling out of this question, but we don't have a plan.
Because Castle only operating system.
Yeah.
I think about the same thing there. It's just 2 or 3 people, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what happens if they die?
Yeah.
Where's the continuity? Where are the forward plans to make sure this continues?
Yeah. So yeah, potentially we could have a conversation with Castle about that as well. Yeah. Yeah. So, by the way, if you die, can we have RISC-OS? Just asking. Yeah. Oh, go on then, one more.
To add to that,
yeah.
Obviously when we look at our age around here, how many people have got in their wills that they want to leave something to RISC-OS?
You should all have that. I'll send you a sample wording for you.
Give it now whilst you're alive.
Very true. Yeah. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.